All right, so hey everybody, you're listening in to Burst GBAC TMD from Shanghai in China. This week in the studio we have a very special guest with us, representing one of the key writers promoting graffiti in Shanghai. We have Dezio. Welcome, man.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. So pleasure to have you on board to do this episode. Really appreciate it on such short notice. So for the people tuning in for the first time, the real-time web series is an in-depth process video meets podcast. So I basically document the visual process, you ask the questions online and the artist gives you the answers. And we basically take an in-depth look on graffiti from the writer's perspective. So kicking straight into the episode, let's have a little look into the general background and general story about your career writing graffiti. So first off, when did you first start writing and how old were you?
Okay, so I first started writing back in, actually it was in Le Mans. So Le Mans is a small city outside Paris. And I was about 14 years old. That's when I did my first piece. I had an older cousin, and I was visiting him. He lived in Le Mans, and he used to do graffiti in a sense, but not really. Like he had painted a little bit. And I remember I talked to him about this graffiti thing that I had seen and that I was like sketching out, and I was like super cool. I wanted to go paint, and he was like, "Oh yeah, let's go paint." And we just went out. We got some shit cans, and we went to this empty lot. But we went there at midnight, and really on edge. Holy shit, we're painting this place.
We're about to break the law.
We're breaking the law. Whoa. And so it was kind of cool. It was I remember being so super stressed out, doing my sketch on this wall that absorbed all the paint, so I wouldn't drip or anything. And I was really proud of the results. So I was like, dude, this looks like my sketch. I'm like a genius. I mean, I can paint without it dripping or anything. I'm a real guy, you know. And so that was my first piece. And basically after that, I kept painting, super motivated, but for a year or two I just kept doing shitty pieces that dripped all over the place and where I couldn't control anything. But I was motivated just because of the first run and first thing.
Was the first piece that you did a Dezio piece?
No, it was at the time I wrote Seism,
how do you spell that?
Seizm. But I kept that for a year about, and then I realized there was another guy writing that, so I was like, okay, I better start changing. But I kept for actually 2 years I kept it.
So how did you come to select the name Dezio?
Dezio came from actually so I was looking for other names, and so I didn't go from Seism to Dezio. I went for Dezi for quite a while, and Dezi is just really the letters. There was some influence from a writer that I used to really like in Le Mans, in the city, called Dezio. I really liked how this guy was writing. It was really nice. And Dezio and Rib. And so I kind of started playing around with those letters, and I liked them. Dezio came with I was tagging Dezi1. I was thinking about changing my name. This was already in around 2000. I was trying to think of I noticed there was many other writers that were writing Dezi, and so I was okay, I gotta change. I gotta find something that's really gonna be just me. Especially I was had been painting for already 3-4 years now, so actually 5-6 years, and so I was trying to change.
So you mentioned that you did your first piece around 14 years old.
Yeah.
What year was that?
94.
In 1994.
Yeah.
Wow. What crews are you a part of, if you are a part of any?
Yeah, I'm part of a lot of crews.
Maybe
Many have dropped off or things. The crews that I still represent now is MCT from Paris. 3 crews from Paris. So MCT XIT and KCW. And then here in China, I write Tuhao. Basically those 4 crews, but 3 from France, 1 international with KCW, and 1 local with just Tuhao.
And what does it mean to you being a part of those crews?
Well, it used to mean a lot. Everything was about the crew, about the family, and about getting along. These people were for me, a crew was really a group of people who really hang out together, paint together, who like not just share graffiti, but like, you know, share life, you know, like we did kind of like everything. And so this is what I had with all these crews. This is why like I keep writing it, even if most of them I don't see them anymore. I mean, now that I live here in China, it's like I'm far away from everyone, but I still, you know, I still try to keep contact and things. And yeah, now it's more of remembering my past kind of like thing, you know. But
more generally, what do you think has been a highlight in your graffiti career so far?
There's been up and downs, but the fact that I'm still painting, I think that's a highlight.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what's been one of your worst experiences?
Worst experiences, other than getting arrested a couple times, breaking my leg, breaking my foot. I mean,
oh shit! What happened there?
That was a really stupid story of me trying to jump over a wall to go faster. We had just painted with my buddy Nine, and went to the wall with leaving the spot, and I decided to like I thought I saw a quicker pass out, jumped over the wall, and landed right on a rock. There was like the other side was the sidewalk, like totally barren. Everyone landed without any problem. I landed right on the fucking stone that was like right there. Boom, my foot was broken, and that kind of like made me stuck for a couple months and all that. I think that would be like quite of a bad story, but
that's a bit of a downer. Moving on to the next set of questions, we are going to set the scene, and I know that personally I know, but perhaps all the viewers or watchers don't know about this, but you partially have two separate stories to tell in terms of the graffiti movement, in terms of your impact and your kind of origins. Whereabouts in France are you from again?
Paris.
Okay.
Yeah.
So could you tell us a little bit about what the Paris scene looked like when you first started graffiti?
Okay, so it was kind of going down. Like it was there had been like so graffiti in Paris started really early on, like around 85, 86. Well, it didn't really had started already, but it was really up. It blew up in like the 90s, where like everyone was painting, and it was like really big, huge scene. But by the time I started, it was like 94, 95, and that's when it was like really slowing down. There had been many people had gotten arrested, and just the whole vibe was like, you know, kind of like a slump. And so it was quite hard for me at first to paint, because I didn't know anybody. I was like really discovering graffiti, and just like I knew I wanted to do it, but I didn't know anybody. So I was just trying to get my buddies out or anything, but you know, we had nobody to kind of like teach us and to school us about anything.
Were writers already doing quite elaborate pieces?
Oh yeah.
And productions, or was it or was there a bigger emphasis on bombing and getting up? And
no, there had been like I mean, the 90s is when it had really blew up, like early 90s. I mean, Paris was a huge capital for graffiti already, like from the late 80s to early 90s. It was really moving, huge productions. I mean, Bando, Mode 2, Locus, and all that. They really like were pushing it in all these different directions. And like people like Nasty and others were like hitting it quite hard on the subways, and so everything was getting like steel. Everything was being painted, and had been like quite decent. And yeah, it's like but when I came in, it was really like kind of a low point in the graffiti, and like everyone was kind of like stopping it in a sense. It was kind of like a drive out. Then it blew back out like a couple of years later. Kind of feel like this is a general trend in graffiti. Like every 5 years, it kind of like goes up, goes down.
And so your entry into the graffiti scene at that time, did it have any involvement in hip hop? Because I know that some of the other writers from some of the other episodes, they've mentioned they were introduced to graffiti through hip hop or music or through skateboarding and all these kind of urban subcultures. So for you, was it? For
me, it was just, I didn't know anything about it. I had just arrived to France. I had come back because I was living abroad, and I didn't know anybody who was painting. I didn't know anything about it for the first 2 years. Like literally, even my first year, I didn't even know people actually had like really like one person had one name. I thought people were like especially like tags. I thought there was this whole entire other meaning to it. Like it was just people sign it, like telling you like this place is kind of like secret language, secret code, and all that. And I didn't know anything about the culture, at least for the first year. And it's like little by little, when I started meeting people and started started figuring things out, realizing that people were only writing one name, had like crews and they were painting, like doing stuff, and like and yeah, that's when I kind of like really dove into it, sorry, and discovered the whole entire scene.
And what type of paint were you using at that time?
I was using a really cheap car paint that I could rack, and we would go to a Bricorama and things like that, these like places where you could get paint. I didn't know they even had like good paint somewhere. Found out like a couple years later that actually in Paris you had a really good shop. One of the first, I think it was called 400 and when I discovered that paint shop, it was kind of like a paradise for me. Like suddenly, like I realized that there's other writers and like a place where I can actually meet writers and all that.
Absolutely. And so how long did you stay in Paris for?
So stayed in Paris from 94 till 2006.
And then after 2006,
moved to China. Yeah.
Moved to China. So whereabouts in China?
So I first started in Guangzhou for a year, and then from there I moved to Shanghai, and where I've been since 97.
So from 97 all the way through to right now.
Yeah.
You've more or less been in Shanghai.
All the time.
Tell us a little bit about the Guangzhou graffiti scene when you first got there.
The Guangzhou scene, at first I didn't really know anybody, and then I finally met through a guy called Chinaman, but he introduced me to Sice, X2R, YYS, and SK2, and like all these people were like considered kind of like the old schoolers of Guangzhou, which was kind of cool because like they had been painting since 2004, so they were like painting for like two years, and they were already considered the old schoolers for China. But they were I think 2002 maybe, some of them, but they were good. They were like really good people, and they were really like deep into bombing and all that, and it was a lot of fun. They were like my first actual introduction to Chinese graffiti, and they were already quite famous in China, and I remember going with Sice to Shanghai for the first time for an event that she was invited to kind of like represent China's girls, because she was a girl actually, like who was writing graffiti. So like I remember coming along with her and seeing and meeting people like in Shanghai and like all that, and it was kind of cool. Look, there was like the first Chinese graffiti jam, I think, what happened in Guangzhou at that time in 2006. Like I don't know if it was the real first, but I think it was. I'm pretty sure it was like the first graffiti jam.
How many writers were there at that time?
Not many. There were like only in Guangzou, or in like general?
Just in that particular jam that you're talking about.
Oh, jam. I don't know, maybe like 20, and it was like regrouping quite like from all over.
20 is still pretty decent.
I mean, vision of writer at the time was kind of like there was 20 people painting. There was maybe like I consider only the crew that I was with to be actual writers, so I think we were like more like we were 6.
Out of that 6, what would you say was the aesthetic or the styles that those writers were painting?
Throw-ups, bubbles.
So very bubbly graffiti.
Yeah, that bubbly graffiti. Guangzhou style at the time was all about that. It was that everyone basically in Guangzhou graffiti came from Hong Kong, but they came with the mentality of it being like you come up with a throw up and you bomb. And it was, everyone had this kind of like mentality of like, coming up with a throw up, and then they would just keep the same throw up. Like they would never change their throw up. So it was kind of funny because like a lot of throw ups were kind of weird looking a little, but they had been doing it for like 3-4 years, and like nobody's like changing or like
you gotta accept this.
Yeah, it's like this is our throw up, and like even when they have like 2 hours to paint, they would just do a 2-hour throw up. It was kind of funny. Kind of like weird. My experience was like me going, oh no, but you guys, you can do like letters, wild style, simples. There's a lot more to it.
And so you mentioned that at some point you went to or migrated to Shanghai.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the scene in Shanghai when you got there.
So Shanghai, when I came here, there was another crew called Reload, who had been here, who also were claiming to be old schoolers, but who hadn't painted for that long. They were more into the whole like strictly paid productions, paid projects, and making sure that I mean, one of the first things they told me when I arrived was, okay, don't mess up our scene. And there's things you guys do in Guangzhou that we don't do here. So I didn't really get along with them very well. And but yeah, the scene was quite close. There was a crew called the Oops who were starting, OOPS, and they were like really cool people. And they're actually some of them are still there, still painting nowadays. You had Ting, you had Hurry, a guy from Italy who was thinking about Dali's, but it's not Dali's. But like another guy was a D. They were trying to do like production pieces and stuff like that. It was a very Shanghai has always been a very like just do productions and nice pictures kind of graffiti scene.
What was your kind of ethos or philosophy to graffiti?
Well, I've always had one philosophy that I learned from I guess from Paris, from France, and from also like I mentioned I was in KCW. Like my friends were really like was really down with One Time and with setup, and these two they really taught me a lot. What they like about graffiti as a whole and as a movement, how everything is important and everything influences everything else. Like you have to be really good at your tag, you have to be really good at your throw up, really good at your simple, really good at your your wash out. Everything you have to find your own original way of doing it, and you got to push that way, and you can't neglect one for the other. They're all really important aspects of writing, and so they taught me this. They taught me also how to like build my characters, how to create like a in a sense for them like characters, like your letters. You have to think of your letters as individual people in a sense, or like a group of thing, and you try to create like an energy that happens, like a rhythm in between the letters and how that work, and the characters you give like emotions to it's kind of like abstract in a sense, but it's there's something about like like strengths of like getting more than just making a letter as a typographic approach to it. I came to China with this mentality and how everything is important. It could be legal, illegal, like in the street as much as on walls and productions. Everything is important. Everything contributes to the culture, the movement, and if you want to really be involved in it, you really have to do everything, because everything is going to, no matter what, influence everything else. On a like a nice wall where you have time, that's when you're gonna focus on your technique. You're gonna focus on the overall look and that aspect to it, where the end result is really important. When you're doing more like streets, bombings, and all that, then it's a lot more of the end result is not as important as the performance of doing it, and like going out and like having to solve situations where, for example, your can's screwed up, you're saying you don't have time, you're on a small ledge, you're all these things. So it pushes you in a different direction. One pushes you when with the risk involved, it pushes you to try things, and the other one is when you have no risk and you have all the time, it pushes you to try something else. And this works the same way for when you work on your tag. You're going to find something that is going to influence your throw up, which is going to influence your full letter piece or your wild style. Everything can influence the other and can help you out. So if you just focus on one aspect, then you'll never really break through from that aspect. And so when I came to China, I tried to communicate this to the people around me. I tried to explain this to many people that I would meet, and who were like involved. The scene was quite dead. I mean, there wasn't many writers. We were maybe like 8 writers maximum. My roommate at the time was also a writer, like an Italian guy called Oboe. A really, really cool guy who's like...
That's a nice tag.
Yeah, really nice tag.
Boy.
Oh boy. And he really was, he was rocking, like actually a really good like train writer, kind of like a very ignorant kind of style, but he was all into like throw ups and just like tags and all that. And it was a lot of fun.
You've just mentioned that you were trying to spread that kind of philosophy to some of the writers here, or at least the people that you met. Do you think they were receptive to it, or they had their own kind of perspective on how graffiti should be done?
Well, I think it's like I said, like half. The crew that I mentioned that was here, I was kind of like claiming ownership of the city in a way. They weren't receptive to this idea. The others, however, were a lot more receptive, and and they would see, because like a lot of writers who would drop by, a lot of them I'd get in contact with, like they would contact me when they know that I was living in Shanghai or whatever, and they would see that actually it's the same kind of mentality. Everything's important if you want to do like big pieces and all that. Everything has its importance, and not just doing a nice little wall and doing a little piece. I mean, it's all about the game.
Is that philosophy that you had then still the same now, or has it deviated in any way?
Not that philosophy of graffiti. I think it's still for me, it's still 100% on. I see, for me, graffiti, it's not just like an art in a sense. It's like a art form. I see it really as a movement, and as in a sense, like a game in itself. It's like an activity in a sense. It has its own world, and and that world is not changing. Like that's what I believe is what's important. I know I'm getting a little lost in my explanations, but yeah, how for graffiti is graffiti, and it's for graffiti writers, and that has always been my mentality, and that's always been how I see it. But I believe there was a foundation with Star Wars and all that, but I think nowadays internet has kind of killed and merged everything together, and so I think it's good to go back to this foundation. Much like, it was funny, like a discussion that I had with another friend on Style Wars and on spray can art and everything, how it actually, at the time, it kind of killed the movement. It had already then, it was the first time where suddenly it defined what graffiti was. So until then, graffiti was a lot of stuff in even in New York and all that. There was a lot of things happening. A lot of writers who kind of got overlooked, like A1 and all that, who were doing complete freestyles and things. And there were other writers also who were doing really cool stuff, but who just didn't appear in Style Wars, so in the end they kind of disappeared, and their vision of graffiti wasn't in the rules of what we kind of consider the foundation. Those books kind of defined and limited it, and then magazines came about, and that kind of did the same thing, and then finally internet came out, and that's even more really limiting and merging everyone of what is good, what is not good. And so it kind of stops a lot of people from pushing boundaries, because they just see this is what's good, so I'm gonna do that. And whereas before it's I don't really know what's good, I kind of saw something that I saw was kind of cool, I'm gonna try and do it, but I don't really know what it was, so I'll just have to try and figure it out. And so by trying to figure it out, they found new things. It's kind of the same way that I think for getting ideas and being creative in general, and that's kind of gotten killed.
That's really the heart of creativity, right? If you understand that graffiti is defined in this certain way, you are constantly trying to work towards that, to achieve that aesthetic and follow that trend. But it takes a certain someone to not only recognize the foundations and know what looks good, but then also be brave enough to push it or deviate from it. And as we mentioned, perhaps not deviate it so much that it is not graffiti necessarily, unless that's your intention. But that probably segues quite nicely into our next set of questions, really, which is about style and process. So how would you firstly describe your style of graffiti?
Everything is important, so I kind of work everything together, from my tag to my throw up to my symbol, my letter. I try to really focus on it and push it in a sense. All right, I have two ways of defining. I'll define it. First way is, it's actually personal in the sense of that's how I draw. It's quite recently I've been working a lot on a sketchy kind of fill in, a sketchy outline in a sense, but really using it as a sketch, because that's how I sketch. when I sketch something. I used to always have like a sketchbook with me where I was even just sketching my surroundings, and I've always loved to draw. And it's kind of like the way I shade and I do my sketchings. And so I decided to try and transpose that into my graffiti. And so that, and the fact that I'm working with paint, and I'm studying paint as a kind of like a breakdown. But this is in my art kind of like that I try to focus on, and like actual paint. So I'm working on like brush strokes. And so recently in my graffiti, I really try to combine those two together. So that's one vision of it. Another vision that I have, where it's kind of like how I used to define my graffiti, because like a lot of my graffiti, it's not a linear graffiti. I don't consider my graffiti to be linear. Like I'm not gonna take one style from the beginning to the end of my piece. I like to flip that around. I like to take out something, make one part of suddenly become into like a bubble. One thing like be like a really straight letter, something different. I kind of see it as I defined it at one point like kind of like a building, where when you have a building, you have on the ground floors, you have like, maybe like your supermarket, your deli, maybe like a restaurant. You have the first floor where it's more like office, like an office building, or like an office something. And then you have like the residence, and then at the top you have like in French, c'est le chambre de bonne, where it's more like the small service apartments and like something like that. All these together are like kind of like they mix and match. They're totally different, and yet together they kind of like work together. So I kind of like always saw my graffiti in this sense, where I like to combine many different elements that maybe have no link with anything else, but that just if you figure out a way, it kind of like works. You don't have to follow like, okay, I started to do my fill in yellow, so my whole piece is gonna be yellow. And then my whole outline is gonna be black, and no, it's push. Do one thing, then change it around. You're not a printer. You don't have any rules. Graffiti is only for yourself. So whatever, just do it. I like not having a whole vision of what I'm painting.
Is most of your pieces freestyled, or do you normally at least have a concept with what you want to do, or have some very fixed ideas on what it has to look like? Or
usually freestyle. I can say it's kind of like both, actually. It's just I sketch a lot. Like I'm always like thinking about like graffiti and like and sketching, and so it's kind of like it'll be with whatever I've been sketching before. But I don't go with a sketch. I don't like going to the wall with a sketch, because I feel it stops you from painting. And I don't feel myself to be like a printer. So when I'm painting, if I come with a sketch, then it means that I have to reproduce the sketch. I don't like this aspect of it. I like more of having an idea, because I was kind of like doodling in a mind, putting that on the back of my mind, and be like, when I'm in front of a wall, I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna try and see if that works, and try and from memory do something. Or if the wall is, however the wall is, you have to think about adapt. That's also one thing. It's like why I like to freestyle is you never really know what the situation can be. Like you can start on a wall, you see a wall is like very square, very thing, and one certain thing can work well. But then suddenly if you go with a sketch and you realize that there's like a big pipe in the middle of the wall or something like that, and then you can either be stubborn and follow your sketch, or you can find another way of doing it. And I find without a sketch, I tend to be more aware of my surrounding.
Are you happy with where you are with what you've developed so far with your graffiti?
I don't know. There was a time where I was like really... I had this idea that every single one of my pieces had to be totally different. And now I'm more trying to push just like one way, and trying to push that a lot more. Before I was like... I would have like I would try to do every time different, but like with a 1 year one concept, and then the next year I had to find a whole new concept. Like there was a year where I was all into blurs, then was a year where I was like all into whatever, like the sketch or the breakdown, or combining everything, or overlapping letters. Or now I'm really just trying to keep that original way that I'm doing like sketching. So it's kind of like really doing something because I'm doing it just for me. I mean, it's not getting me anywhere in a sense. So it's more just I want to do what I want to do, in a sense, and
Nice.
just try and see where that goes.
How would you suggest other writers develop strong foundational letter structure?
I have no kind of like preconceived idea of like what's good graffiti, bad graffiti in the idea of a wild style 3D piece, throw up or anything. I think everything is good if it's well done. That is a very hard question because what it is more is pushing everyone to find their own style and what they're comfortable with. And for the foundation of the letter is just really thinking about all right, what one time it told me, and that really made a breakthrough in my graffiti. One time and setup was what I kind of like mentioned earlier about that character thing. It's what we'd call like a power line.
What's a power line?
So power line is basically what creates the basis structure of the letter. And so focusing on first the power line, basically it could be like considered your tag in a way. Your tag is working on the power line. It's working on like just with one line you're gonna make the letter. So you have to make the letter understandable that it's a letter with a minimal amount of like thing. You're just doing one line. You're doing one sort. At the time, I really had that French mentality before of like it's all about strokes, and you're creating letters with strokes. One time, and especially setup, he was like all his bubble letters like throw up, where it like has nothing to do with strokes, and it's just like the outer shape, but it had that understanding of structure still, and so it's once again it's just a hard question to answer because it's like how to do it, like just like work on one letter and just do it like so many times that after a while you can like do it blindfolded and things will just flow well together. Things like your letters will flow. It's people who try too hard and to try to mask what they're doing with like people who are doing wild styles where there's no letters. It's not wild style the problem. It's the fact that they're not focusing on their letters. And so this is why it's important to do your tags, your throw ups, and everything, because then you're focusing on that part. And when you're doing like a total wild style, like that really breaks out, which is like for most people like can't read or anything, they still can be really, really cool once you see the letters. I'll give an example, which I think was like a kind of uncommon that people have a thing. I would say Suiko from Japan. Now Suiko, what's awkward, like you can't see the letters because there's no letters per se. It's kanji characters, so it's Japanese characters. At first, I thought he was just doing abstract forms, and then when he showed me the character that he was writing and what that character was and where it was, and when I saw that actually like in every single one of him, all his characters are there. It's like it's really dope. The way he kind of like abstracted that and like totally broke it down, yet it's still totally there. It's his character. I can see it now every time I see a piece of his, I see the kinds of characters that make it, even if I can't read it because I don't read Japanese. But it's there, and he really managed to break that down, and it's still a character in a sense. So I really admire him for that. Others, of course, there's a lot of more traditional people who like really do really nice wild styles. Locus. I'm saying him just because I like we saw the book. There is people in the West Coast, U.S. West Coast. They really got that on point. So many people like Saber and all that. Hence, Sever also. Sever was doing really good things. Him and like Revoke. Yeah, really, really, really nice. Total wild styles and like really understanding what they're doing and taking it like blowing up like totally their letters.
How frequently are you painting graffiti still?
Not as frequently as I'd like. On average, at least twice a month. That's like the minimum I can do without going crazy. But yeah, I don't know. I try at least once. Like twice every 3 weeks, something like that.
All right, and what actually still keeps you motivated to keep painting letters?
just I'm obsessed by it. It's like, it's hard to say. It's like, I'm just like, it's just something which I'm like always drawing, and I'm like always seeing letters. Suddenly I'll see like a new connection, and I'm like, oh, that would look really nice if I do this, or like I come up with this idea, or like even I'm doodling, like sometimes my sketches are like a couple centimeters wide, you know, I can never do a full blown sketch anymore that, like, you know, big like A4 or A3 like things are like colored in. I just have no patience for that. I'll just think about, oh, there's this letter, and I'll have like this E that I suddenly accidentally scribbled, and I'm like, that looks like an E. That looks like a really nice, like I think now, like I just gotta write that, you know. I gotta find a way of doing it, and that's what keeps me really motivated.
Recently, or over the past couple of years, you've also begun to shift into doing, well, maybe you've already, or we're already doing it, but you've been doing a little more figurative work. You've been doing some portraits, and so what is the motivation for painting some of those works?
So I think that I consider different. Like for me, I separate graffiti and street art, even if they're both with a spray can. Street art, you're doing it for like a general public. Graffiti, you're just doing it for graffiti writers. So one, I'm just doing it for the graffiti. It's graffiti for graffiti writers. I don't care if anybody sees it or understands it other than graffiti writers, and other than people who know, you know, like it's just among us who know and be like, oh, he's still painting and he's doing that kind of like thing. What I'm doing for the street art, what I'm doing like on portraits and all that. So that's part of like my painting thing that I do, and that's also like I'm always, like I say, I'm always sketching, I'm always drawing. I also like to push that scene, and I like to paint. Yeah, recently I've actually been doing a lot more of these portraits. I used to do like way back in 2000, and even like early days when I had this, you know, same old school mentality for like graffiti. Graffiti was a piece and a character, and I would try to develop my character all the time, and I used to combine them. I used to always have this figurative thing, and then just little by little I just started focusing just on graffiti, and now I'm going back to doing a lot more of figurative, which I actually enjoy quite a lot, and I know it's getting me more projects and more things, and I feel that, you know, as long as I'm painting, I'm happy. So but it's not what I consider like graffiti in the same sense.
Moving on to the next set of questions, which is more about your influences.
Okay.
Who would you say are your top 3 graffiti influences throughout your whole career?
So for sure, Setup, like I'm mentioning him because he really like opened my mind to what was graffiti in a sense, and I think it's with him that enabled me to suddenly push my graffiti to another level. Like I think he, from where I was really like kind of like stagnating and really not getting, and he managed to, well, he just taught me to like, you know, go beyond what I'm doing, and like fuck the rules that I had in my mind, you know. And it's all about making your letters have a feeling, like even if like they're crumpled and anything. So he really taught me a lot, and so I really looked up for him as a main, even if it's not in his style that influenced me, but it's in him. Other writer that really pushed me, I could say like the Reeb from Le Mans, REAB. I mean, nobody will have heard of him, but he had fucking killed the city when I first started, and it was like his way. I guess like I'm saying Reeb, but Dister also from Paris, and for the same reason, like Dister had really killed Paris, and Dister was doing sturdy, and his way of doing the Y at the end was why I started doing my Dezio with a Y also. I was like really influenced by him. I would see him everywhere, and I was like really liked it. Lastly is a hard one, because like really have a lot of people who've influenced me over time. I mean, I'm a geek in graffiti, like looking at everything. Oh, Artful Dodger. AD. Just because of so once again going back to the really early days of when I was running, I did a trip to England where in there I met this writer, but who wasn't really a writer, but who had this VHS, and who like gave it to me, going here, this is English writing. And basically it was the video from AD. It was he was the one who produced that video and VHS, and that was basically my source of graffiti knowledge from the beginning, where I must have looked at that VHS like so many times, because that's the only thing I had before I knew that spray can and subway art existed. Even it was like what I would see on looking out the window on the graffiti, what it was on the track sides, and that cassette tape that I could like actually look at. Drax has an interview in it. Artful Dodger was like, he really influenced my ways of tagging also at the time, because he was doing like these calligraphic gothic style tags, and got me to start doing those, and realizing that, well, especially Paris was killed at the time. It was covered in graffiti, like top to bottom. I mean, I'm not super tall. I remember going up bombing with like a guy who writes Ceso, CESO, and he was like a really tall dude, and we'd like cover Paris. We'd love it, but every time it was just more me watching him put up, because there was no space for me to tag. And so I figured out that actually for me to stand out a bit, the only way I had was like to find a way of like doing my tags differently. And so I started to do like these gothic tags, but that I could rock in the same time frame as anybody else with a tag, and I'd do it like totally gothic. That was kind of cool, because like it kind of made me stand out a little bit, especially when you see like the place was totally killed with everyone having the same style, and suddenly you have this weird gothic tag in the middle.
So for a lot of the younger writers, you know, in a generation where things are smashed together, as you'd say, how do you take influence without biting?
Actually, it's very simple. Like I think there's really like two ways of looking. Like everyone, when you start, everyone bites. When you really start, you know, like at the very, very, very beginning, everyone bites. I must have copied so many. When I finally got spray can art, I was like, looked at this like for ages, you know. Everyone, it's normal. Now, after a while, you know, that's okay for the first year when you're not really doing. But like when you want to become like a real writer, then of course you can't bite anymore. That's like definitely no. Influence is looking at something, understanding why you like it, and trying to see how you can be inspired by it in your work. So it's not about when you see something that's been done, don't just do it. That's the most stupidest aspect of it. But it's looking at it, trying to understand why is it that you like it, why is it that it works. Because I mean, some things like they work for a reason. Like it's the writer will have a good example to that. For example, is Rhyme. Rhyme would put his highlights, for example, just on the inner sides of his letters, where he would he does that a lot even now. So, and he kind of like closes in the inner side of his letters. So if you look at, you know, how he does like the R, and then he has like that little inner hook that he does with like the inner thing, it makes the R smaller. Like if you look at it like a mini R in a big R, and where that mini R serves as to show that that's the letter, and then the big R, like the overall, can go totally fade and like have these whole flares and everything, but you know it's an R because the focus is the highest contrast point is in the center, and it's where the main lines are to identify the letter. In itself, it's really cool, but then you understand that why he does that. For example, his doing the flares and all that, you can still see the letter because he does that, and so that's why it works. That's why it thinks. And people who suddenly will see, oh, he's doing like these awesome flares, and I'm going to do these awesome flares. but they don't get why, it works on one way, it doesn't work on the other. You have to see something, understand why it's good, why it's original, and then try and see how you can maybe adapt it. If you want to as an influence, adapt it to yours. It doesn't have to be like, adapt. Well, it doesn't. It doesn't have to be. It's try to make it so that it's not the same way that that is what you saw. You saw this. You understand why that works. Then try and find another way that would be the same solution, that would solve that problem.
Where are you looking for inspiration?
I look at graffiti still a lot. Well, I'm in China, so there's very little graffiti here, I admit. But internet, and I still look at a lot of graffiti.
Look at the pollution style.
Yeah. Hey, it's influenced. Like I'm using more and more gray colors, huh?
That's true.
But it's really it's about everything you seek, and you have to be open. And for example, when I do backgrounds, sometimes like I try to get like ideas. There was a time where my approach to doing my backgrounds was, when it's time for me to do my background, look what's around me, take one element and put that into my piece. So it could be anything. Just like look around. Oh, I see this leaf. This leaf is this shape. Okay, I'm just going to take that shape and put it in. No matter like what. Look around. You can find anything, like a bicycle wheel. You can find anything, whatever that's around. Just when it's time to do that part, or when it's time to do the film, just like look around, try and see one thing that you like, and do it. So every time it'll be different, because every time it'll be what you see around you. So this was like these kind of mini constraints, or like things that I would push myself to do, where I'd be like, this time I'm going to do this time I'm going to do that. But for this background, I was basically doing that for a really long time. So it was really pushing me to like just look around for influences, look around what's around you.
It's being a bit observant, right? And also being brave to switch up. So with the lack of graffiti around Shanghai, in particular, I guess, how important is traveling to the development of your graffiti?
Traveling, I find, is really important, like in general. Yeah, I'm not sure how it has really influenced my graffiti per se, but it has opened my mind as to a lot of other things. It was very important a long time ago when there was no internet, and where it's only by traveling where you'd be really like seeing people graffiti, people's things. That was really cool. You'd find like all these different styles. And I remember going to Croatia and discovering like all these Croatian writers that were like absolutely fucking amazing. And like only by traveling would I have met these people. But nowadays, I just think it's important as a life thing of like, travel the world, see what's happening away from your little world. I think it's just very important to keep an eye open for it.
In terms of life lessons, what is some important advice that's been given to you about graffiti?
Don't snitch. Don't get caught. One goes kind of like with the other. Avoid beef, but sometimes it's better to face beef head on. And
what does avoid beef mean?
Know your rules. Know what you're supposed to do, what you can do, what you can't do. You're not gonna cover someone like half up on an illegal spot. There's things that you're not gonna do, like a tag in the middle of a piece if you don't have a problem with that guy. You're not gonna cover like this old schooler, or just basic rules, like common sense rules of graffiti.
I'm assuming that you accept the general principle that somebody does a tag, somebody does a throw up, the throw up can go over the tag, the piece can go over the throw up, and production can go over maybe the one piece, and so forth, right?
Yeah.
Do you accept that general principle? I
accept it to a point, like, but in a sense, there is also another underlying thing, which is about I wouldn't say seniority as like it's not about like not painting over like old timers or like that, but if there's a history for a piece, also that primes over like.
So there's some variables.
If it has history, that has could have a superiority. For example, if there's like I'll say, for example, if I go in Paris and I'm painting, and I'll see like a ski tag, and he was like a writer who had like a really nice style, like a thing, a real old schooler. I'll not cover it, or like on a clock tag, I'll not cover that. That has like a history to it. However, if it's someone who just did it like six weeks ago, there's no history to that. I'll cover that. And if there's beef, then there's beef. There's some things like I said also, like, if there's beef and you avoid beef where you have to avoid it, but you have to face it head on, and stand your ground. So beef is so much fun to talk about, though, especially for me here where I don't have much beef. Nothing happens here. So I'm like always like, whoa. And every time I go back to Europe, everyone's beefing with everyone. And I'm like, well, really, like, it's just fine. Like, there's no new beefs between one person with another. I'm like, oh, shit.
So that, once again, leads us nicely into the next set of questions, which is more about your opinions and kind of perspective on graffiti more broadly. So firstly, how do you feel about the graffiti scene here in Shanghai?
Unfortunately, it's dead. I mean, it's not going anywhere. Most writers don't paint anymore.
Why have they stopped painting?
Everything gets buffed, so there's no energy for painting. When you're gonna paint, you paint because you want to get seen, and you want to get seen by other writers. That's your only target audience is writers. It's not general public, and there's not enough writers to really see what you're doing. So basically, when you're painting, the only person that's gonna see what you're doing is just like your normal everyday person who's not gonna understand, who's not gonna look at it, who's not going to care about it. And so then it'll be buffed like immediately. So there's no, you don't have this tension, or, don't get me wrong, I'm still painting, but it's kind of, there's no drive. There's no this whole entire game of like, getting up more than anyone else and getting the attention because you want to get that fame. You're not going to get fame in any way, which way here, because nobody's going to see you. And it'll just kind of like disappear. So the only way of getting fame is to do a piece and take a picture of it and put it online, but that is not something that drives you in the same way. You might as well do that, like on a nice wall, and that's what most people do. They just go into just doing like nice paintings, nice things. This drives them into do like more really just commercial jobs, or go into like design and just do designs, and little by little they just totally drop the graffiti. So there's no more writers. I mean, we have just a few. There's a couple who are coming out who are, painting, and we're doing good stuff. Axer, Solve, Soils, and, a couple of them here in Shanghai. But, it's the scene is really not super active.
How would you recommend that we grow the scene?
I really don't see it possible, to be honest. Like, it's not... I don't see it go anywhere if there's no fame to it. I think the driving force behind graffiti, behind the soul of graffiti, is really all about getting up and getting that fame, getting that recognition. For me, that was it. When I was in France, when I first came back to France, I couldn't really speak French. I didn't really know anybody. So this is why also I had no friends or no backups or no anything, nobody to teach me about graffiti. But I would see graffiti, and I thought that by, in a way, going up, even if for the first year I would have 100 different names, every time and all that. When I saw that people were noticing it, I was actually really got me it go yeah,
you feel good.
It's cool. It was me. I mean, the only thing that I had to kind of teach me graffiti was my cousin, but he was never a writer who didn't know anything. Most of what he taught me at the beginning was very quickly proven to be totally utter bullshit and totally false, and yeah. So I got badly schooled at the beginning. But
who, in your opinion, do you think are the top 3 writers from Shanghai?
Local and international, writers. Bombing wise, I'd say Mad Matt. He really has that, and he killed it these past years. Pieces, if you look at traditional kind of pieces, Axer is really good. He's developed it in really nice pieces recently, and pushing it more into figurative and bombing and figurative in the same kind of vibe, then it's Omaki. Omaki is doing these really, really good character bombings that he's doing. Really, really nice.
Could you define for me what it means to be a real writer?
Real writer is going out and painting. It's really like as long as you're doing that, if you're doing that continuously and often, not just like once a year or even like once a month in a little thing, but you're going out, no matter what you're doing. I mean, you can be really good or not really like really good or not great, even kind of bad. You're still a writer if you're really motivated and you're going out and you're putting work. And no matter how bad you start, if you're doing this often, you're going to reach great levels very quickly.
And is it possible to be a real writer if you're just painting legal walls?
It is, in the sense that if you're really painting all the time, then I'll consider, you know, it like you are. Do you understand the whole culture? No. Are you a real writer? Yes. But if you're only doing one aspect, you can't understand the whole culture and what drives it on. However, I will still, you know, give recognition to someone even if he's doing only like, you know, safe spots and all that. But if he's going like 5 times a week and like, you know, continuously and like always doing, he's putting the work in it, and it's just, you know, someone needs to school him a little bit, but that's it. But he's doing the work, so I'll give him credit. I'd rather someone that like that than someone who will say he's a real writer because he bombs, but he bombs once a year. And
what is in China? What is the actual penalty for getting busted for graffiti?
Well, it really depends. I mean, as long as you're not political, religious, or pornographic, you're quite chill. As long as you're not doing anything to be noticed by the government, you're okay. I mean, it's like there's certain things that you don't touch, you don't go
such as
you won't do, like, don't do anything political, religious, or that. Those things, don't do that, and don't paint on like government buildings or like stuff like that. That's considered political in a sense. Those are really like the big no-nos. But as long as you're doing, you know, and if you're just doing your art or just writing and, you know, and all that, you're quite okay. You'll get a fine, you know.
And in terms of graffiti, what do you think are the pros and cons of social media and its effect it's had on graffiti?
Social media has helped spread out like a lot of writers that were only known locally, and so that has really been good. And like, you know, discovering, okay, like everywhere you want to go, you can get a lot more connections to other writers. If you travel someplace with social media, you can very easily get into contact and painting and all that. Those are all the really good aspects of social media. It's helped create like an international community. I'd say the con of social media is really, it has merged everyone together. Everyone sees, everyone gets the same influence. What's popular becomes what everyone wants to do, and because it's on social media and it's on like something which is fixed, so everyone can like really look at it and study it and basically bite. You know, just like someone comes up with a really cool saying, cool word, cool connection and all that. Back in the days, you'd see it in 2 seconds, because when you drive by or when the subway would pass in front or that, so it's like you just get a glimpse and try to understand what happened, what you just saw. With social media, suddenly everyone does something and it's like immediately like, okay, and so that was like that, and oh, he did the connection like this, and the color was this to this to this. You can really study every single piece, and so it's created like a total merging of what graffiti is. So that's kind of sad, and it makes also some people who don't do anything become very famous.
And so what do you think of the current direction of graffiti?
Up until now, I really thought that, okay, we were a dying movement that was kind of like disco. I believe there will be a new comeback. I'm like kind of feeling it. I think more and more recently I've been seeing people who had totally stopped, in a sense, doing graffiti, who are now starting back. And I think that graffiti, people are starting to realize that there was a lot more to graffiti than just doing your letters in the same way that everyone's doing them. And so this will bring a new generation to suddenly who are now looking, who have been just, everyone's been focusing on the new trends. And I think now we're slowly going to start looking back into the past, into like there's more and more or archives of like graffiti coming out, where you're seeing a lot of more pieces of things that nobody had seen before. Well, nobody recent had seen and all that. And I think a lot of people are now going to be re-influenced. I'm hoping for that. I'm hoping for that. That's what's going to get people back out and back into painting. Eventually it'll die though. We will eventually be disco dancers.
Having painted graffiti for a big portion of your life and your career, what have you actually learned from doing graffiti?
Graffiti taught me one important thing, which was self-confidence. Knowing what I can do and kind of like my limits, but what I'm able to achieve also by surpassing myself, surpassing my fears. I mean, I'm afraid of heights, and I still painted in like super high places just because I wanted to see my name there, even if I was shitting myself. Also, like attempting things and just trying to being confident. I really had lacked confidence when I was a really small kid, especially moving to France where I didn't know anybody, and it taught me to, who cares, just you just need yourself. The graffiti has really helped me in my life in that point. And then it kind of like also did the opposite.
All right, so to wrap up the episode, we're just going to go through rapid fire questions.
Okay.
And each of these questions just requires one answer.
Okay,
so don't need to go in depth into it. First question is quality or quantity?
Both.
Color or chrome?
Color.
Style or technique?
Style, by far.
Tagging, bombing, or productions?
Nah, all three.
Tracksides or freights?
All two.
As a writer, what are you? Tradition or progression?
Progression.
All right, and would you like to make any final shout-outs?
Shout out to my crews, MCT XIT KCW, Tuhao. Shout out to my boys, so Omaki. Shout out to Citos, rest in peace. He was my best friend in Paris, and the guy I used to paint all the time with. Really, we had a great connection, and we used to be like really like brothers. And yeah, rest in peace. I'll always put his name up, and yeah, too many to name. Shout out to everyone I know, and shout out to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dezio, for your time. We really appreciate your perspective, knowledge, and insight around your practice in graffiti, and obviously your thoughts on the actual scene. So we really appreciate the perspective you've given all of us. We really hope that for all the watchers or listeners that this episode has been insightful, inspiring, and educative, most importantly. And we hope that if you do want to see more, make sure you subscribe to my channel and you watch some of the earlier episodes. And we definitely have more on the way. So drop us a like, share, and comment below, and make sure to leave us some feedback on how we could improve the episode and give us some recommendations on who you'd like to see in upcoming episodes. So make sure you tune in again for the next real-time web series.
Yep.